Welcome back to another episode of Step by Step. It's been a while since we've recorded something, Eric and I. And today we're joined by Dom Kuza. Welcome, Dom.
Thank you for having me. I
Yeah,
really
of course.
appreciate it.
Tell everyone about yourself in case like somebody out there by chance doesn't know who you are. I think most people do, but
Uh, so um, I'm a contest prep coach. I do a lot of education stuff. I do product development and brand education for Raw and Revive. I also help with Relive health clinics as well on that end. And then yeah, I work on Camp Jansen under Matt Jansen. And I've been doing this for almost 8 years now. I've been coaching people for almost 8 years. I have a master's in exercise physiology. All my elective work was done in medical and human physio. So a lot of physio stuff under my belt, which helps a lot. But yeah, I competed multiple times. No longer compete, but it was a lot of fun when I did. Now I'm getting into more like endurance training, prepping for a high rocks event, trying to do a full marathon by the end of the year. So the big
cool.
switch up on stuff.
Wow.
Nice. What's one good thing or win or lesson that you've learned in the last 1 or 2 weeks? We always kind of kick off with that.
A good win. I did my first half marathon on Sunday,
Nice.
which was a big accomplishment. Wasn't as fast as I wanted, but still nonetheless running 13.1 miles straight is no joke.
Oh man, my knees would explode.
Yeah, I
That's
can't even.
impressive.
I'm learning to run down the streets like one street at a time. I kind of took that motivation from you. So instead of like I have a 5 mile walk and like I'll like run for like a minute here and there.
Well, dude, that's how I started. Like
Oh
it
yeah.
was you run for a minute, walk for a minute. And then until you can keep like the minutes longer and
Yeah.
longer,
Yeah.
that's when you'll finally be able to like go for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that'd be good. Yeah. Eric, what about you? Anything good happen in your life?
Yeah, two good things. One meathead win. Got 295 for 12 on incline barbell, creeping close to 315. I'm gonna try it next week. So that was good. And then also I found an apartment, which is sick. Because if anyone doesn't know, I live in Boston and rent is ridiculous. But I found a great room with a friend, so pretty excited about that. New place to live. Yeah. How about you, Jeff? What's a good win?
Well, I think the one win that I want to mention is that I'll have some pets soon
Oh yeah.
join
Mm.
me in my house here, my compound here. I bought two rats. Like they're like giant rats. They're like the size of like two hands. And so they're domesticated. So they're raised to like, be around humans and you don't need to vaccinate them. You don't need to bathe them. They're very, very clean, like cleaner than cats, and they're very intelligent animals. And I've just always like had this like obsession with like rats and like I like snakes and turtles and all these like unconventional pets. And I feel like it's the next step up from plants. So I got two rats. I'm gonna name one Bebop, the other one Rocksteady.
You're gonna go with Bebop and Rocksteady? Yes. Yes.
And I bought little hats for them. Like one's like this little carrot top hat, another one's like this little bunny rabbit with bunny rabbit ears. And so I already got all the food, the pellets, the cage, everything, and the girl who sells them. I'm gonna meet up with her probably this weekend, and I have like a little carrying case, so I'll get the rats then. So
That's
I,
awesome.
I've never heard of that, so I'm definitely interested to hear more about it.
they'll be all over my Instagram. They'll be like the new stars of the show, posting pictures of the rats.
You're gonna train them, make them strong,
Yeah.
make them drag
But
stuff around.
anyways, guys, we're today for our listeners out there. I think a lot of people are interested in this upcoming episode because we're gonna be presenting some case studies and kind of talking about some of our effective and I guess favorite fat loss strategies for both Gen Pop and competitor clients. And so we decided that Eric was going to talk about a case, and then Don would talk about a case, and then I'll talk about my approach with fat cycling. I have like two before and afters, not necessarily case studies. But Eric, why don't you kick us off and screen share if you want?
Yeah, let's do it. Share the screen. All right, you guys see this?
Yep.
Yep,
Yep.
cool. So this is Dave. This is before and after. He came to Jeff first, and they worked on some gut issues. I think he had like GERD, right, and some other stuff
He had
going on.
GERD, and at that time I didn't really know how to figure out SIBO, so I did the best I could, but
Yeah.
we did resolve a lot of his digestive issues before handing it off to you.
Yeah. So he came to me, and then this was his after, right at the end of the cut here. You can see from the side, a lot of inflammation came down. He has a
Yeah.
waist, he has lats. Went from kind of this hourglass shape to a Dorito. Pretty sick. And then this is him today, actually, about 4 or 5 weeks into his reverse diet. And he's only about 3 pounds up from these pictures, but much fuller. I wouldn't say leaner, but looking really good. So he's doing a great job. So with him, when he came to me, he was a little worried about his health. His digestion wasn't great. So we took like 4 or 5 months just to get healthy. And I feel like, I know we're not going to talk about drugs on the episode, but he is an enhanced guy. So, he was on TRT for like 4 or 5 months. I got some notes here, ran down his chart before and tried to summarize some stuff for myself. His FBG was high. It was around 98 to 100 pretty consistently. This was in November, 11/1/23. And I started him around 165 protein, 280 carb, and 50 fat. And that didn't change for 4 or 5 months. And he lost 15 pounds. And his FBG came down from 98 to 100 to 78. So, I could tell from the beginning that carbs were going to be a factor here. So we did a lot of carb cycling and didn't touch fat like too much. It reduced a little. Oh, can you guys see my cat?
How did you? Are you going to walk us through how you set that up? Like,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
with body weight and everything, so our listeners
With the starting macros?
yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, I estimated his lean body mass. So, I estimated he was about 165 pounds lean. And the formula that I used, Jeff and I were just talking about this a little while ago on the phone. He's got a little bit of a different formula that I'm going to adopt. But the way I did it was I multiplied by about 14. I got the total calories. Then I multiplied that same number, 165 by 0.3-ish, got about 50 grams of carbs. And then I filled in the rest of the calories, 50 grams of fat. Then I filled in the rest of the calories with carbs. So, that should be about his maintenance. But in his case, it was a deficit for him. So I started to drop him. And all we were doing was walking 2 miles a day, fasted in the morning. And he was training 4 days a week. And the training
Froze up a little bit.
stayed consistent the whole. Oh, I did? Am I back?
No, you're fine. You're fine. So
okay.
you set your total calorie target by taking total body weight multiplied by 14. Then you took his body weight multiplied by 0.3 to get his fats, which you estimated around 50 grams.
Correct.
Then how did you determine protein?
Protein was a gram of 1 gram per pound of lean body mass.
Okay.
And then carbs was the remaining calories.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. So then we basically made small fat reductions, slowly worked his cardio up to 3 miles a day, 6 times a week. So, do a couple of days of 3, a couple of days of 2, another day of 3, another day of 3 until it was consistently 3 across the board. And training day carbs, which is a carb cycle. So that went down to 180 and 250 respectively. Fats at this point were down to 35, and protein was up a little bit to 175.
Got it.
Yep.
Why did you increase protein during this this course?
I kind of was going with my gut on that. It felt 165 felt a little low. I knew he was going to be putting on muscle. I knew he had muscle. Plus, I figure if he doesn't need the protein, it's going to convert to carbs anyway, right? So I don't know. I kind of went with my gut on that and ended up working. Yeah, I wish I had a more scientific answer, but it was kind of just a gut call. Let's see. So then we ran the labs. They were good. So we started doing our thing there, and we pulled him down to 150 carb on his non-training day and 200 carb on his training day. And oh, and this is important to note. The only time he didn't drop or I didn't see any changes in his pictures was when he didn't execute the plan. So when I was going through my chart and I saw any moments where, the weights didn't change or I made a note for myself, it was just because, he didn't do his cardio. He had a crazy work week. He missed a workout. He missed whatever. So that was very telling that I knew we were doing the correct moves. And it was just like, okay, can you dial it in? Let's lock it in. So everything was working well. And he wasn't prepping for a contest or anything. He just wanted to get lean to set up a good runway for growth. He wants to compete someday. I think he'll do really well in Classic, but he wants to put on more size, which I think is smart. For his height. So as things were really rolling now, we started upping the walks about every 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes we do a food drop, sometimes not, just depending on what was going on. And then around April, we got really serious. He went on a vacation, and I think it was a cruise. And what's pretty cool is he ate freely. He did do his cardio, and he did train, and he only went up 5 pounds. Mm-hmm. So his body was burning the food pretty good, and he was sending me pictures while he was on the cruise. He was just full and exploding, like when you diet and you eat a bunch of food. So that was kind of fun, and that almost worked like a refeed. I didn't have to refeed him really at all. I gave him one refeed later in April after I pulled his carbs really hard, but he basically he would either have a day where he overate or he'd go on vacation. So it was kind of like they were built in to this whole thing we were doing.
How would you determine whether a client, should have a refeed or should they have a cheat meal? How do you make that call? And what do you think the differences are there for our audience to take away from? Because a lot of people think they're the same thing. Yeah,
I don't think it's an automatic thing. A lot of people are like, every week, have a cheat meal or whatever. For me, it's it's all about knowing the person. Mm-hmm. If they don't complain ever, and then they're like, man, I feel like shit. This is really hard. I can't do this. It's like, oh, I'm pushing you too hard. You need some food. Mm-hmm. Also all the questions that, Jeff and I ask, there's always how's training going? How's your energy? How's this? How's that? If that's holding steady and then it's a drop off, a big decline, a refeed, and then if it's not physical, it could just be mental too. Sometimes you can tell when someone just doesn't want to do it anymore and they need a break, and it's not going to set them back in any way. So I guess, just reading the person.
And that comes with experience too. I mean, I think all of us at this point have coached, a lot of people, so we can kind of tell when someone's just, kind of being, maybe having a moment of mental weakness and cravings versus, physiologically needing the refeed. And then you see positive physiological response after you have one.
Totally. And if we had continued this past where we pulled out, he probably would have needed more, because at no point in this did he look flat to me. Mm-hmm. He always looked like he was bubbly, and had these muscles kind of full. So when someone's all of a sudden stringy, right, you can see it if they need the food, whether it's a clean refeed or a meal out or whatever. But he never looked to me like he needed it. So we ate on the vacation. He came back. We kind of slammed him when he came back. We upped the cardio to 5 miles a day. Walking, that's walking, if I didn't say that before. Yeah. Fasted in the morning. Let's see. And then this is when we implemented post-workout cardio. So we'd only been doing fasted walks and training. And at this point, we added in the post-workout cardio at 15 minutes on the stairs. And that went up to 20 the next week. And that was the max cardio that we did. 5 miles in the morning, 20 minutes post-workout. And he's training 4 days a week. So 20 minutes, 4 days a week. And the lowest his food got, there were 2 big cuts. It was, I went from cycling his carbs to training day and non-training day to rest day and the body parts that he was training. So I split up, rest day carbs, that was 50. The not so bad days like chest and arms and shoulders had 100 carbs, and then his hard days, the leg days and the back days, had 150 carbs. Yeah. And fats were down to 30 at this point. Protein stayed the same at 175 pretty much throughout.
Yeah, that's pretty that's scraping the barrel there.
Well, then we pushed it even harder and we went to 50, 75 and 120. And that was towards the end when he was getting really lean, and that was when we did give him a refeed as well. After 2 weeks of that, I gave him 600 carbs and a free meal.
Right.
And he felt better. He didn't look that different and he didn't drop. So I think that was more of a mental refeed than it was really a physical one. Um, Plus, he had just done a week of eating, maybe less than a month before that. So
Mhm.
I think he more just needed it. But we were able to squeeze out a couple more weeks of dieting after that.
Mhm.
Um, so so that was the end of the cut, which is not these pictures, but these pictures here,
Mhm.
right? And he was 179 at the end. And now this is him today, just 3 pounds up. But what's cool is the difference between here and here. That's 1,200 calories. This is 3,000 calories.
Right.
And we got him up to 3,000 calories in just 5 weeks. So when he was ready to call it, because at the end of it, I was like, dude, if you don't want to do this, like it's a good time. We can reverse, we can start growing. I'm happy. And he'd be like, I could do another week. I could do another week. So he's a trooper. And then he was like, okay, I've had enough. So we're like, okay, let's reverse. And so this is when I used more of Jeff's formula here, which I think is great. Which was, so he's lean enough. We don't need to estimate really lean body mass. We can just call it what it is. And he was about 179. Right. So we used that times 15, which was about 2,685 calories.
Mhm.
And then we put his protein at roughly 1.25, which would be like 200 grams.
Yeah.
And we filled in the rest of the calories with the carbs and the fat, and we went with 375.
Got it.
And the goal there was to work up his carbs. Right. So now today we just made the change. He's at 425 carb. Same protein, same fat.
I think for our listeners here, Eric, if you don't mind me interjecting here,
No, please do.
and just kind of bringing this to the attention of people listening, is that number one, a great strategy to use on clients, instead of forcing them to work harder or making them feel shameful or weak, or there are some coaches out there who will yell at their clients. Instead, challenge them to challenge themselves. Like how you said to David here, do you think you could, push for a little bit more?
Yep.
I think saying something like that encourages the client to really, incite some motivation within themselves. And they're like, yes, of course I can. I'm going to give you another week, and you can get more
that's a
out
really
of the
good point.
client by being, supportive like that. And then the other thing I hope our listeners take away from is, at least this is what I believe, and obviously you believe that. Don, let us know if you agree as well. But after you achieve a lean state like this, whether it's a Gen Pop client or a post show, result, the goal is to stabilize all of the body systems right away. And I know a couple of years ago there was the approach where you would add 5 or 10 grams of carbs like per week, and then you would slowly taper down the cardio, and that was just prolonging a deficit. Like, Don, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, so like from a reverse standpoint, obviously it depends on how lean the person is, but like I work with a lot of competitors. So like from a reverse standpoint, I'm looking to get body fat back up quickly.
Yeah.
Because I can stabilize leptin, ghrelin, I can help them mentally get their sleep better, get them feeling better in the gym right away. I'm pretty, I wouldn't say aggressive post show, but
Right.
I'm definitely not like conservative after a show. Because I think the sleep, the mental side, like the mental side of things too,
Yeah.
because a lot of people like don't realize, like, if you can get leptin and ghrelin pretty balanced again, which we achieve just by putting body fat back on,
Yeah.
you can reduce a lot of the cravings and a lot of the binging and things like that happen, because you don't have that compulsion to eat, because you're not on this like crazy night's watch to constantly want to eat things because your leptin is like non-existent.
Right.
Yeah, been there, man. Been there. Yeah. So I love that you guys brought that up because what we're doing with him is, a weekly free meal. The calories are going up. So it's been 5 weeks. In my experience, Dom, I don't know if you've noticed this with clients or with yourself. It takes about 8 weeks to feel like you're not ravenous. So I was gonna wait maybe like a couple more weeks and then really start pushing his food, just like use this time, just let him stabilize a little bit. And he even said in the beginning, he was like, "I'm still hungry. What's up?" And I explained to them the whole ghrelin leptin thing. He was like, "That makes a lot of sense." And I think he could just wrap his head around it logically.
Yeah.
And he's been cool.
The other
Yeah,
thing,
well, a strategy I do out of reverses that I really like is, like, for example, this guy, like, I look at like if they had like a baseline moderate kind of maintenance day in their diet, and I'll just start them off rip on that. And I don't pull cheat meals, so like I'll let them have a cheat weekly at that point, where my weekly intake is obviously higher than just the baseline because of that. So I actually instruct them, have your maintenance day plus a cheat. So I'm not replacing, I'm purposely pushing them up, just again to just get a calorie like not surplus, but calories back into play a little bit faster. And then like if they're carb cycling out of a reverse, what I do is I'll take the average that we end on weekly intake, start them on a 7-day of that weekly, or whatever that average comes out to be daily, and then add a few 100 calories to it. And out of carb cycles, I found a ton of success by like doing that approach, which I think like you said, like 8 weeks, like I'm finding like if you keep like a cheat meal in or something like a refeed during that time period too, they're feeling better faster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, Dom, why don't you present your case and what you would like to talk about?
Yeah. So I got a few people in prep right now. This guy, I've been working with him for a while. We I'm a big carb cycling guy. So I use a lot of different diets in my protocols, as far as like dieting goes. So sometimes like my clients will have like a low day, a baseline, a moderate, sometimes even a dig day that's even lower, just depending on what they need. But this is January to yesterday. Yeah, January to yesterday. So what is that? 5 months? Yeah, about 5 months, 20 weeks of dieting. He's still about 6 weeks out. So
It's great.
I'm pretty happy where
Oh, wow.
we're at 6 weeks.
Really good.
This is kind of what I look for 6 weeks. I want boxed out glutes. I want hamstring lines. And that I'm happy about for him. But I'm really aggressive off the start. So if I have somebody who is, an off-season kind of person with me, I got the time to work their food up. I am pretty aggressive to begin with. So I chop pretty hard right off the rip. And he started at 3,600 calories a day, and I cut him down to 3,000 a day. Sometimes I'll even do like 1,000 cal pull, because my goal is actually to get them refeeding pretty quickly. And I noticed that if I start pretty aggressively from the front, I can get those refeeds in pretty fast. And I end up not having to use like T3 as fast as, as quickly as you see some people having to use it. I also see that their training performance also really stays consistent throughout the entire time. Now, obviously, he is enhanced, but he's an older gentleman. Milligrammage is lower. I do take a lot of that into consideration, like their age and, everything, like level of competing, things like that. But right now, one thing that I do a lot with my clients is you see like there's just pretty much only 3 diet schedules for him. And I lay out their food not on a strict schedule, like 2 low, 1 high, 2 like that. I actually lay it out day by day for them, and if they're going to do cardio or not, and then they check in every few days. So I usually lay out about 3 days of diet worth, then they check in. And the reason why I do it like this is I've noticed that if we can control fatigue as best as possible in preps, you usually get the leanest when you do that. So all of these like calls here are based off of fatigue that he's reporting to me. So every check-in, he has to tell me about his mental fatigue, his cardio fatigue, and his training fatigue. And then based off of those fatigue scores, I call them, I'll decide on kind of, all right, yeah, this guy can keep pushing, or we need to pull back. And then like you guys said earlier, like challenging, because sometimes I'll tell them like, hey, bro, you think you can push like 3-4 more dig days? Like,
Yeah.
you think you can push it a little bit harder? And a lot of times you're right. Like you hit the nail right on the head. Like they do push themselves to push through that a little bit more. Like I got a few other guys competing at the Chicago Pro this year, and like he checked in yesterday, and I was like, hey, bro, like, you think you can give me the rest of the week on digs or lows? And he's like, hell yeah, I can. and he was fired up about it. So it's good to see that stuff. I do think challenging your clients is really useful. But you could see like there's no real like schedule here as far as like how it's laid out, but a lot of it was laid out just based on fatigue. He was able to dig really hard here. So then I followed it up with a back-to-back refeed. And then he checked in on Monday. He looked really good. His weight was at its lowest. So I said, let's just keep this food up. Let's keep you on your moderate day. And then we just started pushing his lows again. He'll check in 2 days, and then we'll lay out the rest of his schedule. I'm a big proponent of controlling food around expenditure. So you could see like a lot of these highs and moderates are also attached with no cardio, because I want to use the food as best as I can for performance purposes. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of my guys do hang on to a good bit of their size. But I will speak on that though, because I think that's a training thing at the end of the day. If they're not pushing themselves in training during a prep, they're going to lose tissue probably more rapidly. So he's been pretty consistent and losing pretty rapidly. Not rapidly, but pretty consistently.
Right.
So I really like this method. It's how I teach coaches how to carb cycle people, because at the beginning of a prep, I feel like you can get away with, just instructing like, hey, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, follow this, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, follow this. And then there's a point where now I think we need to get a little bit more intricate with laying it out for them. But you can see like these are pretty deep, right? These are 1750 days. Like that's pretty low. That's like body weight times 10 for this guy. But then I like to follow it up with the back-to-backs. One thing I do try to do, I try to get their like baseline kind of baseline days, refeed days, close to actually what we started the diet at. So 5 months ago, he was at 3,060 cal.
Right.
He's still eating that to this day, just in a different manner, right? Which is important, because I always tell people like a big reason why you're not seeing what you're assuming you'd see from a refeed is because your calorie flux isn't big enough. Like your low days are either not low enough or your high days not high enough.
Right.
And that works really, really well. And it's funny, man, like sometimes like I'll be working with somebody and they're like, yeah, my client's just not moving. And then I look at their schedule and I'm like, dude, they're not even in a deficit. Like calculate the weekly total. And they're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. And I'm like, yeah, this is why we track calories. I do all my cardio based on heart rate targets. I found this to be the most consistent for effort with my clients. So like I stopped doing, like I do time, but I stopped doing like just time, because like my 20 minutes and Jeff's 20 minutes could be completely different, right? So I do a heart rate monitor, chest strap, and then I tell them to keep an average heart rate at whatever I set that target at. And I'm a big proponent of the elliptical. I like it a lot. I think it's a great cardio piece that you could do a lot of cardio on and not have that much impact on the body.
Agreed.
And I think it's hard to cheat an elliptical, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with like touching the rails and stuff, but if you develop a habit of doing that so often that then you start leaning and you start redistributing your weight, it's easier to cheat like a treadmill and stairs than it is an elliptical. So I'm a big fan of the elliptical.
So
how do you come up with the target heart rate?
So I usually start at low, 125, and then I use it as a metric of intensity to build up over time. So the way I like to do the cardio is I look at it in 3 different ways. I can either increase the frequency of days, the time, or the intensity. And as they become more cardio adapted, I'm going to have to increase the intensity because they're getting more adapted to it. So usually I start people like 3 days a week, 20 minutes, 120 beats per minute. And then I'll gradually build up the frequency. Then I'll gradually build up the time. And then I'll gradually build up the heart rate target. Because I do think from a heart rate target perspective too, there's a concept called, it was discovered by this guy, his name is George Brooks. There's a turning point in VO2 max where like your body shifts really away from fatty acids. And that's around like 60-65% your VO2 max. So sometimes people are training too high heart rates and we're not like, yes, you could say I'm splitting hairs right now, but I've noticed it makes a good difference because not just from that aspect, but I also think from a fatigue aspect too.
Oh,
Like,
it's valid. Oh yeah.
yeah. Because like I remember I used to do total cals and tell people like, do a 400 cal cardio session
Yep.
where I would have some people like doing this cardio full blown and then their heart rate's like 180 the whole time. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is not conducive to fat loss. Like we
Yeah.
need to bring you down. And once I did bring that individual down, they started losing fat like the next week.
Wow.
Which
Did you ever-
I think that was a stress component of just how hard the cardio was being performed.
Absolutely.
Makes sense. Do you ever
Yeah.
use HIIT cardio on you guys or your girls?
So I use HIIT cardio on people who have a hard time keeping their heart rates up. Matt taught me something pretty cool with HIIT too. Like if you have an athlete or even somebody who doesn't really train intensely, like has a hard time pushing it to the failure points.
Yeah.
It's good to incorporate some HIIT with those people because at least some aspect of their training is at a really high intensity. And it's a lot easier for those people to push themselves on an intensity aspect on a treadmill or a bike or an elliptical because they feel safer and they can just stop the machine or they can just, go off the rails and they're fine versus like a barbell. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a good aspect to incorporate. I also had a guy, an education client of mine who, we noticed that one of his clients who is a fighter jet pilot, and his last prep, he was flying a lot. So the intensity, the G forces, like his body's used to that. This prep, he wasn't flying. And I told him, you know what, man, I bet this guy needs some aspect of more intensity. So let's put HIIT into his plan. We put that into his plan. And lo and behold, like 2 weeks later, he just started moving again.
Wow.
So I think HIIT is useful, definitely. And I like the Lyle McDonald style. Like you do the HIIT, follow it by lists.
Yeah.
And that works really, really well.
You ever do fasted HIIT followed by the list?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
If they can handle it, like if they don't like get hypo or anything like that, I think it's a good way to do HIIT.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like, we have a lot of similarities here, like where you call a baseline, I call that an anchor. And the way you have, the check-ins being every 3 days there, where you're getting more intensely, monitored, right? As a client, that's how I do things as well. Like for preps, I tell everyone when you're 12 weeks out and on, I want a daily text check-in and daily photos as well with weight and blood glucose. So it gets pretty intense, but I make on the fly adjustments based off of that.
Yeah, like these guys. So like what I like to do, and this is something I got some feedback from like other athletes, was the day they check in with me, I already tell them what they're going to eat. That way they're not waiting for me to get back to them.
Right.
They can go forward with their day. They're not stressed out. But then they don't know what they're eating the next day yet until I answer them. So I found that was nice, just because like this guy lives in Cali. Like, so there's, if he's waking up, I could be in meetings and like I could take an hour or two to get back to him because I'm in a call or something. This way, at least he knows like, okay, I know what to eat today. I can wait to hear about tomorrow's food.
Right. That's cool. Yeah, I agree with all of this stuff. This is, I know, I talked to Cam about, your processes here. So I know you guys track like every metric. So for people
He
watching,
tracks a lot more than I do.
you can see all the stuff that they track. So they really have a good handle on everything, every part of the athlete, which is awesome.
Yeah, one thing to add to that, like I started tracking a lot more blood glucose in preps. Like a lot of people are under the notion that you're very insulin sensitive in a prep. But I do think because obviously if you think about the sleep deprivation, the cortisol responses,
right.
I do think some people develop stress-induced insulin resistance in prep.
Yes.
Because I've had people post-show have high A1Cs, high insulins, and what's correlated to them, they were the ones that had the hardest fat losses. So I started tracking that more with people who give me a little bit more trouble. Because if I can correct that, then we can probably see the fat loss a lot quicker. Right. But in a prep, it's more of a Band-Aid situation. because we can't like stop the prep. So
Right. Exactly. That's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about, which is fat cycling. So let's screen share over here on the right. Do you guys see the photos and everything?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So I want to preface this by saying that, fat cycling it is for everyone, but it also isn't for everyone because it requires a very, very low amount of carbs. And not a lot of people are up for that in terms of their mental and emotional appetite. Now, that being said, it is very, very applicable to a wide range of functional health issues and types of clients. So over here up top, I have a Gen Pop client that I've been working with now for just a few months, and she's down 21 pounds from her start to her current. And of course, you guys have seen me post this lady here, Angelina, one of my best female clients. She placed third at nationals last fall, one spot away from her pro card. And this isn't an exact before and after because this is her very, very start. And we have done many, many shows, right? But this was her most recent photo taken from nationals. I think it was the morning of nationals. So I use a fat cycling approach with both clients. And while these numbers are not their exact numbers, I just want the framework to be taught here in an easy way for those of you to understand. So much like Dom, I have what's called anchors here over to the right. And over to the left-hand side of this chart, you see different phases. Now, these phases can last any number of weeks, okay? So I'm not suggesting that a phase should be 3 or 4 weeks. It's however long it takes. It's however long you continue to see progress, and then you decide that you need to make an adjustment, whether a cardio adjustment or a nutritional adjustment, as you see here. So one of the main premises or the reasons why I like fat cycling is because of insulin resistance. And that's why I said, oh, this is a perfect segue for what I wanted to talk about. Because insulin resistance is probably going to be the #1 killer of progression. Even if you are in a deficit, it results in a poor looking physique and it results in stalling within a contest prep. So the reason why I like to employ this in a lot of Gen Pop clients in cases like, with gut health issues or whatever, with fasted blood glucose being in the hundreds and high fasted insulin, is because this builds a runway for carbs to eventually be added in, hopefully, okay? In most situations that I've encountered, if I can get the client to react well to carbohydrate-based diet and carb cycling, I can get the results. But how do you do that? Okay. So I don't like removing carbs completely. So I like to keep a little bit of carbs in. The way I start this calculation here is, so first of all, I'll say the woman on the top weighed about 180 pounds at her start. Okay. And her name's Bobby. And Angelina on the bottom weighed about 160, I want to say, at her start. So I estimated both women's lean body masses to be around 120 pounds. Angelina competed at about 116, 117, I want to say. And Bobby on the top is now down to 161 or 162, I believe. And she started around 180 something. But as you can see, Bobby, you could probably still pull off another, 20-ish pounds off of her, right? So she may be a little heavier than 120, but you get the idea here with the pictures. So the way I set this up, if you guys want to try this out, is for protein, I will set protein to about 0.8 to 1 times lean body mass. Okay, so you first have to look at the client or make body fat assessments and say, what is their lean mass? Then you take that weight and you multiply it by, let's say it's 120. You multiply by 1. That's how I got the protein. Then I took total body weight. Let's just say the client's weight is 150, okay, total body weight. I cut that in half. That's the carbs, okay? And then I tell the clients for the carbs, put them pre or post workout or in your first 2 meals of the day if it's a non-training day, okay? And then for the fats, I will equate that to protein usually Or what I'll do is I'll calculate the total calories. So in this case, if let's say this client comes to me, they're eating whatever, all right? I might say, okay, as a rough estimate, I'm going to take their body weight, 150, multiply it by 14, which is just like a standard body weight multiplier for most women to estimate maintenance calories. That's around 2,200 calories, okay, if my math is correct. And like Dom, he makes a big cut in the beginning, right? So for these women, I'll make a fairly big cut relative to their intake and relative to their size. So I go from, let's say, 2,200 down to 1,860, okay? And then, so once you calculate protein and carbs, whatever's left is fat. So that's how I'm getting the 1,860 here, okay? So to set up the fat cycle, I have a high fat day, a medium fat day, and a low fat day. Protein and carbs are constant. All I'm doing is I'm dropping fats by 20 grams per day. That's about a 200 calorie or 180 calorie to be exact drop for every day, okay? And I might have a potential cycle like this. So in the beginning, I might go low, 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 high, low, low, medium, and then repeat low, 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 high. And the reason why I have a 7-day cycle is because it's easy for a lot of people to memorize and understand rather than some weird 10-day cycle. A lot of Gen Pop clients, they just can't wrap their head around that. And because there's only 2 low days, I have a medium here. And because there's 3 low days here, I have a high day here because we're creating more of an energy deficit. They're getting hungry, so I want to hit them harder on that 4th day. Now, carb cycles can be set up in many different ways, right? Like we've seen Eric set up, Eric set them up based off of training demand. So we had our normal body part days like chest and arms. He had like a moderate day, similar to Dom's baseline. Then he had a higher carb day for legs or back or whatever, which is similar to Dom's refeed, and a low day, which is kind of like, you know, Dom's push day, right? Which is things are very, very low. You can put that on a rest day or you could put on an arm day too, okay? But you probably wouldn't put on a leg day. So similar to that, I have my carb cycle setups. If people have, you know, taken any of Dom's classes or my classes, I'm sure you've learned of many different carb cycle setups that you can do, all right? And so there's no right or wrong way to do it. But either way, the way this progresses is the fats get continually lower. So you see in phase 2, high day is 100 versus that was the medium day in phase 1. So I'm continually getting lower and lower. But what's important here is that I keep an anchor in. And the reason why I keep that anchor in is because sometimes I might want to refeed using carbohydrates. So how do you do that? That's why I really like Dom's presentation, was because he kept track of where that client started, where their metabolic rate was at its most optimized level. And the way I teach this is sort of like if you're on a hiking trip and you don't know where you're going and you're coming down from a summit or whatever, you're trying to find different trails, right? Sometimes you might want to mark where you came from. So if you get lost, you can look at your trail markers and retrace your steps back to where you came from. So that's why I call it an anchor. So you remember where you started from. So if you look at this calculation here, I'm going to anchor them 1860. So let's say I'm in phase 1. I'm cycling. They're losing weight. They lost like 15 pounds. And then we hit a wall. What I might do is I might introduce carbohydrates, assuming that blood glucose is also responding favorably, meaning that they're responding well to carbohydrates. So what I do is I will take fats from the low day and cut it in half. So that's where I got the 40. The 120 stays the same. That's still 1 times their estimated lean body mass from the beginning. And I'm keeping 1860 as my anchor. So where do the carbs come from? 255 carbs will give me 1860 calories while keeping protein and fats constant. So I'll refeed them for, let's say, a couple days or maybe even a week at 120, 255, 40. Then I drop them back down into a fat cycle, and I might enter phase 2 here. And I'll repeat the process with anchor 2, anchor 3, until we get down to really, really low poverty macros here. And then it becomes a question of biofeedback response and I take more of an approach that Don takes with his preps. All right. So fat cycling, this is fat cycling in a nutshell. All right. There are other things that, we can talk about, like, protein veggie approaches, because when you're getting down to this right here, 960 calories, this is very, very, very low calorie dieting. It's very, very hard. And you're gonna create some quote unquote metabolic damage here, but we all know that the metabolism is resilient. You'll bounce back, provided you know how to do that. And sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to get as shredded as Angelina here. I can tell you guys listening that Angelina, we were fat cycling around 40, 30, 20, and I believe her carbs were 60 and her protein was 120. So that's what it took in order for her to achieve this look here. And it was very, very, very minimal PEDs for figure. You'd be surprised just how little was used to achieve a third place finish at nationals there. So, Dom, any input from you there? Have you ever done anything like that before, like fat cycling?
I've never done fat cycling like that.
Yeah.
I've done like higher fat days, like for people who are like stubborn kind of fat loss. I've noticed that some people do well with that. I do tend to notice that females respond better to like fats being present with lower carbs sometimes. Like the couple of wellness girls I had do nationals last year, one took third, one turned pro. Their lower days were kind of like one of your fat days. Like it was a medium fat with low carb, decent amount of protein. And they responded really well to that. I also like the idea of fats because I do think it's a missing key in a lot of people's preps towards the end. Because like I'm sure when you refed them, they probably didn't need as many carbs to fill out because the food stuck a lot better.
Exactly. And you got the intramuscular triglycerides as well.
Yeah, like if I ever have somebody like low fat coming into peak week, I usually start working up their fat as peak week starts, even if I'm still depleting them, just so that their IMTGs are coming up. And then once I start pushing the fat, or once I start pushing the carbs, they're on a decent amount of fat. And then they're able to stick the food a lot better.
Yeah. And
I've never tried like a fat cycle though. That looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it works. I mean, if you ever get a case like, the first woman above, they're like insulin resistant, their digestion is just absolute shit. Because as you said, Don, when you're leading up into a peak week and you said you start loading fat slowly, right? You don't need as many carbs then to fill them out. And the problem is when coaches shove a bunch of carbs in, and a lot of fibrous carbs too, they make the mistake of that, is that their stomachs get distended and they can't hold poses properly. They're not as tight. And so you alleviate a lot of that if you can refill the intramuscular triglycerides first and form like almost like a mattress for everything else to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I tell people like, if you think of a ribeye, if you get rid of all the marbling, doesn't the steak shrink?
That's a good analogy.
Yeah. Put them back, the steak gets bigger.
Yep. So I mean,
like
next time if you ever want to try something new,
it's interesting.
Yeah, because you do keep carbs in, because that's important, for thyroid hormone and everything like that. I won't get too much into the physiology here as I have in the classes, but that's basically what it is. There's one last thing that I want to mention is Protein-veggie. All right. I know I did this to Eric.
Oh God, we've done it both seasons. Go ahead, tell him.
Yeah. All right. So Dom, have you ever used just like Protein-veggie?
Yeah. I've done like the Lyle McDonald rapid fat loss approach.
That's where you got it. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the only thing that's ever broken me. That was like, I'll do anything and everything. But I remember 2 years ago, there was a moment where Jeff called me and he was like, all right, dude, I need you to do protein veg for the next like 4 days. And I was like, Jeff, I can't, dude. He was like, okay, we'll do something else.
Well, for those people out there who've never heard of that book, Lyle McDonald's Rapid Fat Loss Handbook, it was written in what, like the early 90s or something?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the premise is, so for people listening, if you want to try this, and I actually do like that approach for Gen Pop clients who really can't commit to any sort of dieting or tracking, or they're traveling and they're always dining out. I just tell them commit to 2 protein veggie days per week. And what I tell people to do is, let's say for women, it's 1 cup of egg whites or 1 1/4 scoops of whey protein, and they can add veggies to the egg whites if they want to make an omelet or they make a shake. And then lunch and dinner, about 5 ounces of cooked lean protein, chicken, turkey, or fish, or scallops, or shrimp, with 1 or 2 cups of green veggies. And then the last meal of the night is repeat the first meal. And that's it. And if you do the calories out on that, if someone out there is plugging this stuff into MyFitnessPal or Macros First app, it's literally like 800 calories.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's nothing. And it is meant as a starvation diet, but you have the refeed days, and you're assuming that these clients are going out and having dinner and having cheat meals. So it all kind of balances out. And I actually have implemented that with a handful of my Gen Pop clients. They love it because it's so easy. So
Yeah, I've noticed that too. And a lot of them say to me, is maybe even noticed it too, it's like they'll be hungry on that day,
yeah,
but they won't be hungry during the week.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, I can be hungry for 1 day or 2 days. It's like it works in prep because it's so extreme. But for me, I can speak for me, it's like I'm starving the whole time. Like the whole, it doesn't go away. But because they have so much to lose and they're eating the
Well,
rest of
I
the
think
week,
it's a good
short,
approach
easy.
to counteract some cheating.
Mhm.
Like to counteract some cheating and whatnot. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I've done like in lifestyle Gen Pop situations where I like purposely keep their diet low cal because I know Saturday and Sunday they go out and eat 2-3 times.
Yeah, and it
So
makes up
like
for
the
it.
total cal kind of makes up at the end for it all.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the whole on paper versus practice in practice
Yeah.
discrepancy.
Well, I think that's being realistic about a client though. Like I think sometimes coaches approach clients
Yeah,
unrealistically. Like you need to that it's called cognitive empathy. You have to put yourself in their position, see what bandwidth they actually can function on, and you have to curtail to that. Like you can't just like, oh, you have to feed up, you have to feed up, you have to feed it up. Because for some people that'll never work.
right. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to say too that with that client Bobby that I showed the first, if anyone's watching and wants to scroll back on YouTube to look at the photos again, I did start her off on Protein-veggie, alternating with days on a flexible meal plan, and that's what got the insulin resistance to tip to begin with, because her fasted blood glucose was around like 114, I think. And once that started to tip, I dropped her into the fat cycle as I outlined in my case study presentation. And then her glucose really started to move. And now she's back on her original flex plan with, I think it's like 2,000 something calories, and she's continuing to drop.
Nice.
So,
Great.
so that's the magic of getting insulin sensitivity to work, because once the body is digesting, it's processing properly, you're lowering inflammation, all of that good stuff. People can eat a lot as long as the systems can take it, and that's what I want people to understand about these strategies. It's all about getting responsiveness from the system.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap things up? Pretty neat 1 hour here.
Yeah, no, I think this was great.
No,
Your guys'
that was great. That
presentations
was
were
fun.
awesome.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. Dom,
Yeah.
you got anything going on? Anything you want to share? People, classes and coaching and stuff.
No classes right now. I'm gonna take the summer off from
Oh,
classes,
yeah.
and then I'm coming out with like a self-paced course
Yeah.
that people will be able to just do on their own time. But other than that, no. Just follow me on Instagram.
Awesome. Follow you for coaching and car content.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us, Dom, and thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah,
Next
thank you,
time.
thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right.